Hi, everybody. I'm Rebecca Guanson, and I am here with the KCIT Spotlight, where we spotlight our volunteers to show some of the amazing work that goes on behind the scenes at KCIT and our amazing members. So today, I have the distinct pleasure of being here with Jim Fouts. Jim, thank you so much for being here with me today.
It's good to be here.
Let's, in true Rebecca fashion, I like to just jump right into the interview. So could you tell us a bit about yourself and your background, the work that you're doing now?
Sure. I've worked in crisis intervention, mental health crisis intervention for probably close to 40 years now. I've been a crisis worker, if you know anything about the mental health system, a delegate, which is somebody who looks at whether somebody's met the grounds for a mental health commitment. I've run crisis intervention, full scale crisis system. So I've done all of that. I've worked throughout that whole time with police and first responders in training them how to deal with folks with mental illness, de-escalation, some emotional intelligence stuff. And I've spent a lot of time with that, to the point where it's about 5 years now, I switched a lot of my career to being a forensic social worker. So all I do now is work with police and the courts. I do a lot of consultation to help folks set up stuff in dealing with people who, typically it's people who have a mental illness and are at risk of getting involved with the criminal justice system. So that's my full-time job. I've worked with KCIT since 2001, just after 9/11. I wasn't fully involved. I ran a support group for folks who were in the building during the crash. So I've had some experience with that and did a lot of work with bringing people over to that. The reason I actually got involved with KCIT was even before 9/11. I had been involved as a crisis worker with a triple. There was a homicide suicide where someone killed 3 people in a college and then killed himself, and just figuring out how do I deal with this with a group of people, and started doing a lot of research. I'd done some work with the Red Cross, so I saw how they do it. And then I looked at the NOVA model, which was the original model that KCIT uses, and just felt that it hit my personality. It felt good to do. When I saw it in action, I was a support person and saw it in action. I thought this thing really does work. It really does make a difference in helping people's lives and changing, the foundation of how they're going to do it. It doesn't fix the issues, but it gives people that foundation that's necessary. So shortly after that, I became a trainer for KCIT and did that from 2002 to about 4 or 5 years ago.
You were one of the trainers in the basic training that I took in 2014 when I first became a volunteer for KCIT. So, yeah.
Yeah, it's strange when we do that. I meet so many people and they say, I remember you. It's like, I'm sorry. I've done a whole lot of these things and I'm not sure I remember everybody. But there are some people who are totally unforgettable.
Right. When you think back on your robust history with KCIT, are there any moments that stand out in your mind that you would like to share?
Boy, it's hard because there have been so many things that I've done. I think probably the most difficult, and it seemed to be, it made more of an impact on an entire community, was something that KCIT typically doesn't get involved with, to be honest, doesn't really fully do it. But it was a cluster suicide. There were 5 adolescents who killed themselves, and then during the same time period, within a week period, there were 2 additional kids who ended up dying in a car accident. So we had to go deal with that school. And initially the school, as a lot of schools are, didn't want to do anything with anybody outside of their own circle. But once we sat down with the principal and with them and started going over what KCIT can offer, we set up a pretty intensive program for them. We did over 75 GCIs during about a week's period, did a lot of public notices, a lot of public training. And I can't forget one kid just who came back from it afterwards, as it was in a community I was near. So he came back and he saw me and he says, I remember you from that group and you really made a difference. I'm choosing now to become a social worker because of the help that you offered and how much it was, how helpful it was.
That's a really beautiful experience.
It is to see somebody whose life, you touch them for the rest of their entire life.
Yeah.
And so many of the things we do with KCIT really does. It, like I talked about, setting up that foundation for people. It really does change their life. Some people it's impactful to the point where they really know this was impactful. Other people, it just helps them become who they were going to be anyway if this didn't happen.
Yeah. So I guess that leads right into my next question. When people say, why KCIT? Why take a training? Why become trauma informed? What are your answers to those questions?
Well, I get that question a lot, especially
Mm-hmm.
now from police officers. It's like, why, life is full of trauma and why
Mm-hmm.
should I care about it? It's because trauma affects everybody and it has long-term effects. And just by understanding that and understanding people's reactions and how they're reacting to their own trauma, it gives you a sense of how you can deal with them in a much healthier way and in a much better way. I remember a police officer once told me there was a guy driving, he was driving completely, really erratically and almost hit somebody, and he pulled him over, and the guy came out of the car and he was screaming, "You can't take my car, you can't take my car." And as it turns out, this guy had been traumatized, had been beaten and left for dead about 20 years before. And how because that police officer knew, okay, these are trauma reactions. It's not because he's high. It's not because he's a mess. It's not because he's something else that's there. This guy had been actually in the state hospital for a while due to all of the trauma from it and how it affected his life. And he was just coming back and he needed his car because he just got the first job he's had since before college. And he needed the car and he was so afraid. And because the police officer could understand trauma was causing that, he had enough empathy to say, okay, let's calm down, let's do it different, instead of saying up against the car, in the cuffs and the whole 9 yards. So being trauma informed really does make a difference in how you see people and what you give them. KCIT has, just right from the beginning, KCIT understands that whole issue of trauma and how we go in and just through this guided experience that we help people with dealing with it. It helps them have, I keep going back to that word foundation, but it helps them to have this foundation of, it's okay, I went through something, I can get through this, but there's some work to do. And there's some issues that I might run into that I have to go, but they've prepared me for it. So I can't tell you how many times people have said thank you. That's part of the other thing. There's whole lot of jobs that you have in this field that you may not feel like you're being really appreciated. But I haven't done one GCI where somebody in that group hasn't said, thank you. I really know that this is going to mean something to me.
Yeah.
And the weird part is it doesn't feel like that to me because my goal is to make people feel better, and you can't. So.
Right. I really appreciate you sharing that.
Yeah.
So in closing, and shifting gears a little bit, is there a fun fact that you would like to share about yourself with our viewers?
Boy, that's weird. Luckily, my wife's not listening because she would have a list.
I'll bet.
Of things, life is just fun. I just absolutely have to appreciate life. I love practical jokes. I love to do those kind of things. I've done enough of those to sometimes go a little bit too far, but sometimes I've had enough of that just thinking back, my wife will look at me every once in a while and she'll see me smiling and we haven't talked and said, "You're thinking about this, stop."
I love that.
Because she
Fantastic.
knows those things still give me
She knows.
joy.
She sees
Yeah.
it.
Right.
She sees it.
Yeah. But it still gives me joy to think about how much fun and how much, yeah.
Well,
So,
thank you so
mhm.
much for spending time with me today, Jim, and I will talk to you soon.
Yeah.